Okay, got to adjust this stupid bloody camera. Okay, here we go. There, that's better. Hi everyone, welcome to Terry Talk Moves. Let me just stop that shit. Hi. It's still doing it. Let me see what I can do with this. How does it stop? That's got it. Yeah, welcome to the May live stream where I'm doing a lot of horror movies that I like. And let's see. Hi, Franny, how you doing? I know we've got a few people on the chat, and hopefully we'll get a few more. Hi, Toby. Yeah, so basically, I've got a stack of discs here. I've got one that I've got some movies that Viavision sent me, a 4-movie box set, which is a kind of deep cut, old school, not science fiction or fantasy, but interesting from a sociological viewpoint. And I think I'll start off with that to keep the lovely people at Viavision who send me interesting things happy. They keep sending me movies and TV shows which in some way are involved with beaches. Hi, Lionel. Yeah, and they sent me the box set of all of Baywatch by accident, and they were very nice about it when I mentioned it to them. But they also sent me this because I requested it. The Gidget film collection. I actually got the Gidget film collection, which has Gidget, Gidget Goes Hawaiian, Gidget Goes to Rome, and a TV movie from 1972 called Gidget Gets Married. Hi, Mr. Londell's Groovy Movies. Hi, FG. Yeah, so they sent me this. It's a 2-disc Blu-ray set, which I'm kind of happy about because my preference these days is to get Blu-rays rather than DVDs. And they're 2 movies to a disc, that kind of thing. No real commentary tracks, but it's kind of cute. I like what it is. It's cute. It's a bit silly. It's a very deep cut for Violation to put this out, particularly on Blu-ray, because I'm not sure how much of a market there is for this. It doesn't say anything about region coding, and there on the back you can see Cliff Robertson playing Moondoggy. I kind of like these movies. I've got to be honest about this. They're silly. The sexual politics on them is crazy. 1950s, with fathers policing the sexuality of their daughters and all sorts of things like that. But yeah, I got that, and it's a bit of fun. And I love the fact that Viavision, who's also the same company that does Imprint, are putting out these weird and wonderful things. But for the most part, this video is going to be about horror movies, a little bit of chat, a little bit of Q&A, mixing it all up the way we usually do. So, what's the weather like where people are? Because here it's cool and rainy, and what we know in the vernacular is shitty. Mr. Londo never liked good movies, put me to sleep. See, it's an alternative to medication, mate. You just, you start a bit of Sandra D, you're not off, you don't need to take medication. There's no downside to that. But yeah, so the weather here is kind of crappy. The cats aren't happy about it because if you have pets, you know this. They blame you for the weather. They assume that you're Thor, the god of thunder. And so Luna and Jill, our cats, blame us for the weather. Not sure why. FG says it's warm and sunny and clear here in Kansas. Yeah, watch out for those tornadoes. They can take you to weird places. Let's have a look there. But yeah, so there's a lot of horror movies here. A couple of things I picked up on DVD from eBay because I'm inclined to do that at the middle of the night. 14 Degrees and Dark, Franny says. Clone of Clark, hi Terry, thanks for your thoughts on The Peripheral. My pleasure. The Peripheral I love. I am just so hanging out for the second season of The Peripheral. Franny says, already had fireworks. Why? Maybe they're celebrating that silly stuff that's going on in England. Maybe you got some English people going mad where you are. Spring weather here in Michigan, warm, sunny, then rainy. Yeah, that sounds about right. Sounds a bit like it is here, where you can't predict with any real accuracy what the weather's like. Let me just check my weather radar because my weather radar's always a bit funny here. Yep, more rain for a while and coming across from South Australia. It's Cinco de Mayo. Yeah, it is Cinco de Mayo. And congratulations and happy Cinco de Mayo to all the people who celebrate it. We don't here. We celebrate other things like Anzac Day, which is a kind of military-based public holiday that celebrates an unsuccessful invasion of Turkey during World War One. So everybody's got their weird local holidays. We also get a holiday for Melbourne Cup Day, which is a horse race. Here in Melbourne, you get the day off because there's a horse race. And there's another public holiday the day before the football grand final. So we have weird shit here as well. It's really off and unusual. But I was actually going to do this tomorrow, but I thought that if I do this tomorrow, a lot of people are going to be watching that silliness in England, and so I may lose audience. But I am putting out a video tomorrow. Tomorrow I've got a crazy good box set that I got, which is 1940s and 1950s movies that I haven't seen on disc before. It's fantastic. So I'll give you a hint. It's all Arabian Nights kind of movies, like swashbuckling Arabian Nights movies, and Imprinter put that out. And I'm doing a full video on that because at least one of those movies I really love, and I'm going to watch them all because at the moment I'm in the mood for that kind of low stakes adventure film. And so I'm looking forward to putting that video out. I've got to edit it together tonight. But yeah, so life's good. Times are good. So let's get started with the first one, which is Canadian. And hi to anybody from Canada here. It's a trilogy of movies about werewolves. I wish my phone would stop buzzing. The Ginger Snaps trilogy. Now, if you haven't seen these or you haven't seen these recently, solid horror movies. It's about a couple of teenagers called Bridget and Ginger, who live in a shitty Canadian town, and in the town, Ginger gets bitten by a werewolf and becomes a werewolf. Basically, it's a lot about puberty. It's kind of gory and funny at the same time. And Bridget, her sister's a goth, and they're kind of both living in little fantasy worlds. They created a hermetically integral world for themselves in their home. But suddenly Ginger hits puberty, becomes a werewolf, and starts getting attracted to boys, which really pisses off Bridget. And she's got to deal with the fact that her sister's turning into a werewolf. Really interesting series. The second one is when Bridget herself turns into a werewolf. And she meets a very freaky 14-year-old girl called Miranda, played by a very young Tatiana Maslany. And Miranda is a scary person. Tatiana Maslany, who people remember from Orphan Black, and also in Jessica Jones, not Jessica Jones, in She-Hulk. Really creepy in this one. Now, I haven't watched the third one yet, but the Ginger Snaps trilogy is a solid and a little bit forgotten trilogy of werewolf movies. And I rewatched the first two a couple of months ago, and they're great. They're solid. They got their own kind of freaky world that they build. They're about the way boys see girls and the way girls have to go through so many changes in puberty, as indeed do guys. A lot of fun. There's a little bit of depth to it, and it's worth checking out because these kind of movies don't get enough love. And this one's a box set which is from Viavision again. This wasn't deliberate. This is from Viavision, and I like it. I'm not sure about the third one. I heard the third one is pretty shitty. So has anybody seen these? Because they're worth getting, and they're very cheap here in Australia to pick up copies of. And I can't see anything that says anything about region coding on these. Let me have a look. No, there's nothing at all about region coding, which doesn't mean that they're not region coded, but that's a recommend from me. I think it's freaky and fun, and kind of has a different spin on werewolves in an interesting way. Anybody seen the Ginger Snaps trilogy? Because they are kind of cool, and I think that's the sort of thing that middle-aged geek girl might want to watch too. And she is moderating at the moment, so if you say anything bad, or if you're a sex bot and you're thinking of you're hitting the live stream, you're going to be in deep trouble because she is tough. Give us a growl, middle-aged geek girl. I want to see how tough you are. Yeah, Friday, it's worth getting. It is on some streaming services. I'm not sure which ones. Yeah. Yeah, she's on the prowl for naughtiness, middle-aged geek girl, so watch out. She's not taking prisoners today. Now, the second thing I've got is a box set that I picked up cheaply on eBay. I didn't have it, and this is a kind of TV series from ITC back in the 1960s that I like, and I'm surprised that I didn't already have a copy of this. It stars an American actor, because they imported a lot of American actors to England for these kind of adventure series in the 60s, called Richard Bradford, who kind of channeled James Dean, even though he looked nothing like James Dean. Man in a Suitcase. This one's good, mostly because of the supporting actors. Now, this is a chunky one too, where they put, because at the time the coding on Blu-rays wasn't as precise as it is now. You get like 3 episodes per disc. This one came from Umbrella, but Man in a Suitcase is that kind of 1960s spy action show that ITC and the British did really well at the time. And there were 30 episodes of it, and there are some extras as well. Clones of Clark says the first Ginger Snaps is definitely the best. Absolutely, I agree. Second one has got a real freakiness because of Tatiana Maslany, and I kind of like that freakiness as well. And it's got a couple of nice action sequences in it. But yeah, Men in a Suitcase, bit of a deep cut from the 60s, but worth it. It kind of gets in that same genre as things like Jason King and Department S, and The Adventurer with Gene Barry, and The Protectors with Norrie Dawn Porter and Robert Vaughn. It's in that kind of a genre. And I kind of wanted it in the collection because I'm collecting those ones because of that nostalgia factor, and also because you get really interesting character actors in the minor roles. So let's see what we've got. What am I going to do next? I've got a whole bunch of stuff here. Let's have a look at this lot. Now, oh yeah, got to do this. I wanted to revisit this movie because it's it was popular about how long ago? Blah blah blah. 21 years ago, 22 years ago. Alistair says, I remember Man in the Suitcase. I think they repeated it in the 90s in the UK. Remember, it was decent. Yeah, I think the scripts were good. And there's some really nice production design as well. I like the way they did things like apartments and other businesses in these kind of ITC shows at the time. Mr. Londo's Groovy Movies. When it comes to werewolf movies, I'm either in the camp of Lon Chaney Jr. or the first 3 Underworld movies. There are a lot of good ones. There are things like The Beast Must Die, which Amicus did, which was a very weird werewolf movie. And also Silver Bullet, the adaptation of the Stephen King story, is rock solid. I haven't revisited that one in a long time, but I'm inclined to track down a copy of Silver Bullet and watch that because I remember it being good. But the other thing I got, which is not, the rest of this is going to be genre related, so bear with me on this. The next thing I got, which I was looking forward to, is The Howling's good, absolutely, and all of the Howling sequels have got their own virtues. There was, I think, Howling 3 was filmed in Australia, and has cameos from a whole bunch of minor 1980s Australian celebrities. I think Dame Edna Everage turns up, and Bill Collins and a bunch of other people. But this one I'm going to rewatch because I want to reevaluate the way it talks about media. Not really the sort of thing you associate with this channel, but still. Josie and the Pussycats. I picked this up like $6 on eBay, and I wanted to rewatch it. I didn't love it enough to buy a new Blu-ray of it, but I'm going to rewatch Josie and the Pussycats, based, of course, on the cartoon. But it's got a solid cast. You've got Tara Reid, Rachel Lee Cook, Rosario Dawson's in there as well, Alan Cumming. They're not vampires, but they are pussycats. So I'm going to enjoy that one. Howling 2 was popular with teenage boys for some reason, Friday says. Yes, it was because there were a lot of busty substances in it. In fact, the Howling itself has a kind of werewolf sex scene in it, if I recall correctly. Yep, middle-aged geek girl says, remember to hit the like button if you haven't already, as it helps out with the nonsensical YouTube algorithm. Yeah, Friday, Josie and the Pussycats is an underrated gem, absolutely. Yeah, there was Josie in Outer Space. It was all a spin-off of Archie, the Archie series. Tara Reid, solid cast. Yeah, because you got to sit down and watch it with me, middle-aged geek girl, because you should. Josie and the Pussycats is fun, and having Ellen coming in there doesn't hurt at all. But yeah, so don't go dissing something you haven't seen. But no, she's not going to watch it with me. I'm going to watch it this afternoon just to be spiteful. But let's get on to horror musicals. Not a big genre, really, horror musicals. But this one, on the back, the blurb is fantastic. The blurb on this one says, Shaun of the Dead meets La La Land. That in itself means you've got to watch this movie. This is the silver bullet scene from the Wolf. From the Wolf by Side predates John Carpenter's thing when no one gives it credit. Absolutely, the tension ramps up in The Beast Must Die, and I kind of like that. It's got that very weird device and gimmick at the end of it, but still, it's I think it tried to do something different, and all credit to it for that. Anyway, this one you got to see. It's a Christmas movie, and it's a zombie movie, and it's a musical. Anna and the Apocalypse. You got to see this one. It's about a girl called Anna in a Scottish town who wants to leave school and leave her shitty little Scottish town. Yeah, that was what was that one? The French werewolf movie based on historical events is pretty good. Is that Hour of the Wolf? Let me just see. I'll check this out. Early in the morning, I can't spell werewolf correctly. Brotherhood of the Wolf from 2001. That's what it was. Yeah, Brotherhood of the Wolf. I'm fairly sure I've got a copy of that, but I'm not entirely convinced. I'd have to look that up on the database. But yeah, Brotherhood of the Wolf definitely. It's got Mark Dacascos in it, and let's see. Yeah, it was directed by Christoph Gans, and solid cast. Vincent Cassel's in there as well, and Monica Bellucci's in there, which is kind of cool. Jacques Perrin, who I saw first in The Young Girls of Rochefort, he's in there as an old man. Yeah, let's have a look here. Uh, Musicals. I need to see The Incredibly Strange Creatures Who Stopped Living Became Mixed Up Zombies. Yeah, I've seen that. There's a Ray Dennis Steckler, who was the director. There's a box set of his stuff that came out recently, and it's crazily expensive here, so I haven't been able to get it. But yeah, I saw that movie first on like one of those late night TV shows where they had a horror movie host, and they showed movies like Ray Dennis Steckler movies. Let me just have a look at this. The Incredibly Strange Films of Ray Dennis Steckler. $150 US, which is prohibitively expensive for me. But it's got a whole bunch of his films. Let's see what it's got in there. Wild Guitar, which is a movie he did, which is kind of a rock and roll musical. The Incredibly Strange Creatures Who Stopped Living Became Mixed Up Zombies, that's on there as well. The Thrill Killers, Ratfinger Boo Boo, and the Lemon Grove Kids. I've seen those before. Body Fever and Cynthia the Devil Doll from 1969. Blood Shack from 1971. The Hollywood Strangler meets a Skid Row slasher and Las Vegas serial killer from the 80s. And no, I can't say that. Basically, he did some adult films later in his career, and they're on there as well. But Ray Dennis Stickler was an interesting guy, not necessarily in a good way. Hour of the Wolf, the French post-apocalyptic drama. There might have been an Hour of the Wolf French apocalyptic drama. Let me see. Let me have a look here. There's short from 1968 with Max von Sydow. While vacationing on a remote German island with his young pregnant wife, an artist has an emotional breakdown while confronting his repressed desires. That's an Ingmar Bergman film, so no, that was probably not what I was thinking of. But let's have a look here. Hi Keith, how you doing? The Beast of Givaudan explained that's what the Brother of the Wolf is. Yeah, yeah. Good film. I like it. It builds its world interestingly, and the conceit of what the beast is really kind of interesting as well. Brotherhood of the Wolf. There are a whole bunch of those French genre films which are fantastic. In fact, I've got one in this horror movie list that I've got here, which is probably one of the best horror movies ever made. The French tend to have a really nice take on horror films. Let's see. But yeah, Anna and the Apocalypse you should watch. A lot of fun. The biggest threat, though, isn't the zombie apocalypse in this one. It's actually a school teacher who goes mad during the zombie apocalypse, which is kind of a fun take on things. Yeah, Hour of the Wolf was Cedar in Bergman film. I saw it once decades ago. Yeah, I went to a Bergman film when I was like 15 because it had David Carradine in it, The Serpent's Egg. And I didn't like it at all at the time. And maybe the 15-year-old me wasn't the best audience for it. Richard Hart, £5 super chat. Thank you very much, Richard. Really appreciate that, mate. I saw a whole bunch of movies that I probably shouldn't have seen when I was younger, and didn't ruin me, didn't ruin my childhood, but it was a missed opportunity in a sense because when you see a movie that you're not ready for when you're young, you tend to disregard it when you're older until you kind of go, okay, I'll give it another go, and then you see all of the things you didn't see in it when you were younger, and that's kind of a fun thing too. It's good to have that sense of discovery and going, yeah, I thought this movie was shit, and I told all my friends this movie was shit, and I dissed this movie out of all proportion to how I really felt about it. And then you go back and revisit it, and you go, "That's kind of good. That's interesting. Wow, this movie's much, much better than I thought it was." The Extraordinary Adventures of Adele Blanc-Sec, absolutely. If you haven't seen that one, you really should. Adele Blanc-Sec's fantastic. They should do a series of movies because they're spending entirely too much money on Tom Cruise films. But yeah, middle-aged good girl says, "Me with Barbarella. Still don't want to see it." Barbarella's fantastic. It's got one of the best pop soundtracks of the 1960s, and it's yeah, Barbarella's great. Maybe it's more suited to straight men and lesbians than it is to you, middle-aged good girl. But there's a certain charm to Barbarella, which I know eludes you, but I still find it a charming little film. But let's get on with the next one. And this is great because it's almost proto steampunk. Yeah, Fireman 42. Love the Adele Blanc-Sec film. Absolutely. I like her sitting in the bathtub smoking cigars and just, reading things. That's a perfect thing for me to do. This one's got a good cast. Robert Stevens, Robert Powell, Jane Leporter, The Asphyx. I like The Asphyx. It's about some people in kind of middle Victorian England who find out that there's a kind of personal angel of death called an asphyx, which takes your soul out of you at the point of death and takes it away. And they find a way to trap the asphyx so it can't kill you and basically create immortality. But yeah, I really like this one. Not a big budget, but really great concept. And yeah, let me get the chat here. Kayan says, "I never tried Vegemite. You poor thing." I grew up on Vegemite because it was cheap and we were very poor. And every sandwich I took to school for like 2 years was Vegemite. And I didn't like Vegemite after that, but then I reintroduced myself to it. Jack Schwinn says, Barbarella was my introduction to TNA. I was 13. Yeah, okay. 13 is probably not the right age to watch Barbarella. We've got a nephew who's 13. I wouldn't show him Barbarella. Hey, Barbarella with a passion. Sorry, Joe, Richard. That's okay. I mean, not everybody's going to like every movie. And even though I want everyone to like the movies that I like, I've kind of grown up enough to go, yeah, that's not going to happen. Some people are just simply not going to like the movies that I like. And I may judge them for it, not in your case, Richard, but there are some people who don't like some fine films that I like. And I kind of have this instinct to judge them about it. But yeah, anyway, back to the Asterix. Murdersville says the Essex was a great late night movie. Gave me the willies as a kid. Campers and acquired tastes, Friday says, yeah. Always wondering, are Vegemite and Marmite no, Vegemite and Marmite are not the same. Vegemite is the Avengers and Marmite is Thanos. Let's just put it that way. Thing to remember, if you ever watched Barbarella, so Jane Fonda was either drunk or hungover in most of the scenes. It was the 60s, of course. Everybody was drunk or hungover in the 60s. Yeah. Yeah, the Asterix, I just saw that in the cinema when it first came out in the State Theatre in Sydney. And it blew me away. Now, there's a twist in the tale of the Asterix. There's a kind of frame story that you see at the start and you see at the end, which is let down, unfortunately, by some very shaky makeup effects. Yeah, the end of the Asterix seems to be done by a production team. Yeah, good night, Eric. Thanks for joining the thing. Are you going or coming? But yeah, I know it's late in some places, but yeah, the Asphyx is great. Middle-aged good girl says Marmite is the mockbuster to Vegemite's blockbuster. Yeah, it is. Marmite I don't like at all. New Zealanders like Marmite, and English people like Marmite, but Vegemite was the original gangster, and Vegemite is it has the same kind of cultural weight as poutine has for Canadians, or bubble and squeak and Yorkshire pudding has for people in England. Paper mache face mask at the end. Yeah, KN, absolutely. Hi, Mr. Diaz Genzi. Hello again. The Adele movie is wild and whacked. Brotherhood of the Wolf, excellent too. Of course, Barbarella's tremendous fun. Asphyx looks interesting. Wonder if it's streaming or something. I don't know, but find a copy of the Asphyx because it really does stick to that Victorian England sensibility. And there are movies that are set in a past time where the characters act more like contemporary people. But in the Asphyx, they act as people of their time. And I kind of appreciate that groundedness that gives the film. Clone Clark says, watch Dial M for Murder and grabbed a movie schedule. Barbarella, Saturn 3, and Rocky Horror Picture Show were included on it. This is where I learned of those movies' existence. Yeah. Before the internet, it was incredibly hard to find out things about movies. So you had to buy reference books like the Psychotronic Film Guide and things like that to know what was out there, because otherwise you wouldn't have a clue at the things you could possibly see. And yeah, the struggle was real. And these days it's easier, though there tends to be a whole bunch of echo chambers, particularly around mainstream Disney movies and mainstream cinema in general, where people who do some internet channels just talk about whatever's coming out right now. And I find that self-limiting, because if you just talk about the most recent film that came out, you're talking about it at the same time a million other YouTubers are talking about it. And I find that I don't want to get lost in that crowd. Possible double feature, the Asphyx and on borrowed time. Yeah, absolutely. There's immense possibilities there. The creepy flesh is almost as good as the Asphyx. Yeah. Copper tubing, not rubber. Yeah. It's yeah, the Asphyx I like. I'm gonna have to rewatch that one as well. But it's one of those movies that I'm crazily happy that I've got it on Blu-ray, because I think it's a quality film. I think it's a solid horror film, and because I saw it in the 70s in the cinema, things like that, I've got an unusual relationship to it, and I liked it at the time. I like it now. I can appreciate it in spite of the flaws that it has, and it's a lot of fun to rewatch. Then we're going on to what I talked about before, Darkman, Sam Raimi's Darkman. which is crazily good stuff. Dark Man is a Frankenstein movie in some ways. It's part Bruce Wayne, part Phantom of the Opera, the good one, not the Andrew Lloyd Webber one. It's part Phantomas, it's part Count of Monte Cristo, it's part The Shadow, and it's probably my favorite Liam Neeson film. Kayan says, I might be trying to trap my Asterix immortality. No, thanks. Yeah, I want to live forever. I don't want to get any older than I am, but I want to live forever because interesting things keep happening. But yeah, Darkman I like. Sam Raimi at that sweet spot before he did A Simple Plan and things like that. But after he did the first few Evil Dead movies, Darkman came in really well. And Liam Neeson was great in this. Frances McDormand playing Julie, his girlfriend, is great. It's rewatchable as hell. I can watch this every year and really have a lot of fun with Darkman. The two sequels are total shit. And the main villain, played by Australian actor Colin Friels, has the sketchiest American accent ever, which is a really problematic thing for me because Colin Friels, the actor who plays the industrialist, the kind of property magnate in Darkman, I saw him on the stage in the early 1980s when he was doing theatre here in Australia, and he blew me away. Fantastic actor in the wrong movie. YouTube just popped up a commercial in the middle of your live stream. Make sure they pay you, Mr. Londo's review. Absolutely. Yeah, Darkman was awesome. I love Larry Drake as the villain too. I like the sequels with Arnold Vosloo. Yeah, that's fair enough. I don't like him. It wasn't Liam Neeson's first action role. I think he was in um, what's that movie with the glaive and things like that? The kind of medieval action film, the fantasy one. Yeah, Benedict Cumberbatch's American accent's dreadful. Yeah, I think it's improved over time. His Doctor Strange accent's improved. But Kroll, yeah, Kroll, that's the one. Liam Neeson was in Kroll, so it wasn't his first action film. Keith F says, I can take or leave Vegemite, but love and hate Marmite with equal measure. Vegemite is versatile. If you like, get a spoonful of Vegemite and stir it into gravy, it really pops gravy and improves it enormously. Friday James says, I love the way both movies they use the science of the time without correcting it for modern science. Had to do that recently, proofreading a friend's essay on H.G. Wells. Yeah, he was in Excalibur as well. As it's a literature essay, it's how the science was at the time, not how it is. Yeah, those anachronisms take me out of a movie in that sense. When somebody uses contemporary slang, for instance, in a period film, I find it an alienating thing rather than inclusive. Using the slang of the time just a little bit, just like spreading it through the movie, really adds to the verisimilitude, but kind of neologisms that weren't words at the time the movie is set. Really pissed me off in some ways. Keith F says you can do that with Marmite too. Though. Yeah, absolutely. Vegemite's good too because you spread Vegemite on a sandwich and put a cheese slice on it, and then put it under the grill, and the Vegemite and cheese go together really well. Yeah, but Vegemite is a culturally important thing here in Australia. Neeson was in a few action movies before DM, the Delta Force, and the Deadpool. Yeah, he is a weird actor. He a couple of years ago he did a really bad action film here in Melbourne, which was supposed to be in America, but they were using Melbourne because it was pandemic times. And it is just the worst cliched piece of shit I can imagine. I saw it on a streaming service, and I thought this guy's cashing checks. Apparently, he's just done a movie where he plays Philip Marlowe, based on the Raymond Chandler character, which is getting some good reviews. But we'll see. I think Liam Neeson's one of those guys that slightly veered into the Steven Seagal territory, and that's a shame because I think he had chops as an actor. Yep, I'm dissing the Liam Neeson, absolutely middle-aged geek girl, because I've got to be honest about movies on this channel. And Liam Neeson has done a number of really manure movies. But let's move on. This is a recent one, but it's good. It's hard for a movie to jump genres in the middle of the film. I mean, From Dusk Till Dawn did it, going from a crime movie to a vampire movie. But doing that shift, Clones Clark, I love reading Big Sleep. Yeah, I love all of Raymond Chandler. The language in Chandler's books is chef's kiss good. Yeah, Neeson's still doing action films at 70. Well, so is Harrison Ford. And he's like, what, 107 now? The Indiana Jones movie's coming up. We went to the cinema a couple of days ago, and they had the trailer for the Indiana Jones movie. And yeah, it's an interesting kind of geriatric action film genre that's happening at the moment. But I'm not going to talk much about this one except to say you should see it. Edgar Wright's Last Night in Soho, which is a horror movie. It's a time travel horror movie, and it is really good. I love the way Edgar Wright's dynamic camera work and visual imagination works in this one. Fantastic needle drop soundtrack as well. Beautiful evocation of London in the swinging 60s. And it's surprisingly good. And when that tonal shift changes and it becomes a different kind of horror movie, it really works. It's in context and it's quite disturbing as well. So if you haven't seen Last Night in Soho and you're kind of dithering about it, my advice is to see it because I think it works, and I want to see whatever Edgar Wright's going to do next. I think that he's a director whose stuff I will always give a go to. The action grandpa genre absolutely slow is going to make a sequel to Cliffhanger. Harrison Ford's in the Hollywood Walk of Fame too. Wow. Thank you, Cult of J. My Vegemite beanie is great, and it's quite warm too because the weather is cooling down here, and rocking the Vegemite beanie is kind of climatically appropriate. And I love a little pom pom on a hat too. It kind of adds a whimsical touch that I really appreciate. But yeah, sorry. Last Night in Soho, fantastic film. Really should check it out. And it's got Terence Stamp in it too, so why wouldn't you love it? But let's move on a little bit. Geez, I'm getting through these fast. It's really Harrison Ford was a famous silent movie star. Yeah, there was a Harrison Ford. There's actually a car dealership here in Melbourne called Harrison Ford, which predates Harrison Ford's fame. Is it just me that just doesn't like the bobble? Yeah, it probably is just you because it feels quite nice. But yeah, so there's a Vegemite hat going. Um, yeah, so let's move on. This one, if you haven't got this one in your collection, you got to get it. It's one of the great horror movies, and it's one of the first body horror movies from 1960. And Georges Franju, Les Yeux Sans Visage, Eyes Without a Face, with Edith Scobb and Pierre Brasseur. This one you've got to have in your collection. If you're a horror movie fan at all, you've got to have this in your collection. There's no two ways about it. This one's actually the BFI version, which has got a load of extras in it. It's got a booklet, and I always love a booklet. And it's a 2-disc set as well. And if you haven't seen it, it's about a young woman called Christiane, whose father is a famous plastic surgeon. She's been disfigured in a car accident, and her father reconstructs her face. And unfortunately, her body keeps rejecting the face transplants he does on her, where he kidnaps and strips the face off and kills young women in order to try to save his daughter's looks. And Christiane, played by Edith Scobb, is the victim as much as anything in this one, even though the other victims, the young women that the Professor Genessier, played by Pierre Brasseur, kidnaps, are also the victims. The movie has a fantastic appearance about it. It's in black and white, mostly filmed on locations with some studio sets, but for the most part on locations. But it is just a masterpiece of horror cinema. Kidef says, Eyes Without a Face is just a fantastic movie. Let's see. Came from that film by Billy Idol in the 80s, Fireman Not 40. Yeah, Billy Idol did a song called Eyes Without a Face. He also did an album called Cyberpunk, so he was very cutting edge for his time. Eric says, I tried to watch Scream, but that thing that made it different 20 years ago now makes it boring to watch. Just your opinion. Yeah, absolutely. And yes, Keith F., the ending of Eyes Without a Face is poetic and beautiful in its own way and kind of liberating as well. Eyes Without a Face is a great movie. Have to agree with you on that one, Mr. Londo's agree with me. Absolutely. Speaking of Terence Stamp, Spirits of the Dead, 1968. Yeah, the Roger Vadim. Was Roger Vadim? No, actually, there are a whole bunch of different directors on it. Was Fellini did it? He did the Toby Dammit adaptation with Terence Stamp in it. Alan Alan Voice says, Terry, have I seen White Buffalo? What do I think of colloquialisms in that one? Haven't seen White Buffalo for a long time. That's a Dino De Laurentiis Charles Bronson joint about. It's basically Moby Dick with a buffalo. So yeah, White Buffalo's weird. There's a whole bunch of weird Charles Bronson movies later in his career, not at the end of his career where he was just doing vigilante movies, but things like White Buffalo and Breakheart Pass and those kind of movies were quite interesting. I don't remember about the colloquialisms in that one, but yeah, more correctly, White Buffalo is kind of like Orca with a buffalo, which is again, of course, pinched from Moby Dick. But yeah, uh, Charles Bronson's an interesting actor from the viewpoint that he did a really good TV series in the late 1950s, which you can find on Tubi, called Man with a Camera, which has got short episodes and he gets to do some real acting in that. It's given me a whole new appreciation of Charles Bronson to watch Men with a Camera on Tubi. Lots of good character actors in that as well. But if your country enables you to get Tubi.tv, really worth doing. Puncher of Ab says, saw White Buffalo and Shadow of the Hawk in the drive-in. Yeah, they were all over the place. They were drive-ins. They were in double features here in Australia, where you get two Charles Bronson movies back to back in the second run cinemas. Have I seen Lisa and the Fox Fairy? No, should I? 5:42. Let me have a look at that. (2015). Lisa's a nurse seeking love. Her only company is a long-dead Japanese pop star who turns her into a fox fairy out of jealousy. Now, every man who desires Lisa shall die horribly. How can she overcome the curse? So is that a Kitsune thing? It possibly is. Looks like a little bit of cultural appropriation in that one, but I'm going to keep that tab open and see if I can find a copy of Lisa and the Fox Fairy. But yeah, so thanks for the tip, FireMoon42. That's part of the reason why live streams are great because people make recommendations. I open the tab and keep the tab open and see if I can find the movies later on. But yeah, I kind of like. I've actually got a nine-tailed fox toy that I got in a gacha machine in Japan. Fox Fairy sounds like anime. It's not anime. Do a Google search on it, Mr. Londel's Groovy Movies. Speaking of buffaloes, what do I think of the film Buffalo 66? Not a fan of it. Let's put it that way. I think that Vincent Gallo is one of those flash in the pan wannabes. And yes, it does have some transgressive things, particularly with Chloe Sevigny in it. But Buffalo 66 just didn't grab me. I think it's a little too self-conscious and a little too aware of the kind of movie it's trying to be. And it's a kind of vanity project by Vincent Gallo. But let's move on. Oh, I've got a few left. Open a new bottle of water. This is a very bare bones version of it. Telly Savalas, Elkie Summer, Silver Kashina, Lisa and the Devil, Mario Bava. Now, this isn't by any means the best Mario Bava movie. I'll be honest with you about that. But I like it. It builds up a weird atmosphere with Telly Savalas kind of playing the devil While on a vacation in Spain, an American tourist, played by El Kisama, is drawn to the terrifying world of mystery, madness, and murder in the surreal spine chiller directed by Italian horror maestro Mario Bava. A blonde countess, played by Alida Valli, who was in a whole bunch of things, including Eyes Without a Face. Her imbalanced son, played by Alessio Urano, and a creepy bald butler, Telly Savalas, who carries around a mannequin, all come to play in this fantastically bizarre tale, liberally spiced with gruesome gothic deaths. But yeah, so I like Lisa and the Devil. Let's see what the chat's going. Never bet on the Bills to win the Super Bowl. I'm not sure what that means, Clark. Clone of Clark. I like Death Hunt, survival action horror with Bronson and Lee Marvin. Yeah, Eric, absolutely. I'll watch any movie with Lee Marvin in it. I'll be honest with you. Have I ever seen The Amphibian Man? Yeah, absolutely. The Amphibian Man's a great, almost a fairy tale kind of movie. It has a beautiful look about it. It's a Russian science fiction movie, which has a look unlike anything that, of course, Western um, science fiction movies do. I think it may be on YouTube if you want to look around. You can also find it on discs. But The Amphibian Man is a movie you should see. It's kind of like the other Russian horror movie I really like, the 1960s version of V. It builds its own world in a marvelous way. Death Hunt's an interesting movie, says Mr. Londels. Lots of action and good dollop of suspense. Oh, paraphrase line from Buffalo 66. Yeah, Buffalo 66. That's one of the things. There's some things that happen in movies from a non-American viewpoint, where there are lots of kind of American references, particularly to sports ball and things like that, which take people who aren't Americans out of the movie rather than into the movie. And I think that when you're making any kind of movie, everything you do into a movie is or should be intended to pull your audience toward the screen, not pull them away from it. And too many very local references in a movie tends to have an alienating effect to most of the potential audience. There you go, Punch of Abs, found it on a Russian YouTube, absolutely. Yeah, the Amphibian Man is really worth seeing. Now, we all have problems with the Russian government, but I think Russia's film culture is still worth appreciating. And in the same way that Germany made some interesting movies in the 30s, which weren't particularly geared towards the Nazis, but were there to just entertain the masses. And Russian science fiction and fantasy films are still worth watching, even though Putin is a murderous bastard. But yeah. But Amphibian Man, I recommend that to everybody. I think it's one of those movies that, whether you like horror movies or whether you like science fiction movies, whether you like love stories, it's accessible to a whole wide audience, and it really works as a fairy tale. It works as science fiction. It works as a romance as well. Eisenstein was great, absolutely. Eisenstein was fantastic. The Russian step sequence, I'd say. Lost Voyage of Sinbad's renamed Toho movie stars Toshiro Mifune. You have me at Toshiro Mifune. I'll watch anything Mifune does. What I've really got to do more of, though, with Toshiro Mifune is watch the early stuff he did for Kurosawa. There's a thing, I think it's called The Silent Duel. Just give me a moment. The Quiet Duel, sorry, which is a 1949 Kurosawa film with Toshiro Mifune, where he plays a doctor in a small town in the post-war period when Japan had very few resources. And it's got such an interesting character arc for the doctor character, played by Mifune, who, I won't do the spoilers on it, but if you haven't seen The Quiet Duel, it's incredibly worth watching. It's a very different Kurosawa movie, but it kind of leaves maybe the movie that started me loving the Showa era of Japan, Showa. era of Japan and Japanese cinema, because there are so many universally accessible movies that came out of that particular era of cinema. And you can go down a beautiful rabbit hole of early 1950s to early 1960s Japanese cinema. Throne of Blood is great. The Samurai Trilogy, absolutely. You've also got, um, yeah, any number of Kurosawa movies. I saw Rashomon for the first time a couple of years ago, and that blew me away as well. Just so many. And of course, you've got Kurosawa's The Hidden Fortress, which is a movie they stole a lot of Star Wars from, and it's better. The princess is better. The comic relief characters who became R2D2 and C3PO are better. They actually remade The Hidden Fortress a couple of years ago, but it didn't work as well as the first time. The Black Lizard, saw The Drunken Master the other day with Mifune. I think the Western may have been Red Sun with Mifune. I haven't watched a lot of tokusatsu television shows. What would I recommend? I've watched a few tokusatsu TV shows. They're a little hard to find, but there is a Toho. I'm fairly sure. Just give me a moment. Here's a Toho tokusatsu YouTube channel where they're actually showing a ton of them. Let me have a look here. Got 200 odd channels I'm following on YouTube. I'll find this one for you and I'll post a link because it's got so many really cool tokusatsu TV series. It's the Toei Tokusatsu channel. Give me a moment. I'll just post a link for it. And they have tons and tons of really interesting, really weird tokusatsu movies, TV series, a lot of which are dubbed, or a lot of which are subtitled as well. But here's the link. Don't go to it now, go to it later on. And you're going to find a lot of really weird deep cut, particularly 1980s tokusatsu series. Yeah, my pleasure, Cult of J. It's a lot of fun to dive into, and they have all of the episodes, so you can just follow a particular series all the way through. And most of them look like they were filmed in school playgrounds for the most part, but they've got a really interesting aesthetic about them. Let me have a look at that. For anybody was, yeah, I think it's Red Sun we're talking about here. Yep, I'll post the Wikipedia link for you to take a look at. It has Alain Delon as well. Red Sun with Charles Bronson, Alain Delon. Who's else is in Ursula Andress, directed by Terence Young, who did the Bond films as well. There you go. There's Red Sun. Yep. Japan is the only country to do a film based on William Hope Hodgson's story, Matango. Matango is a great film to watch. It's mad. It's got people singing and dancing on a boat with ukuleles, and then they go to this island and it turns mad, and they get turned into mushroom people. Really a fun movie. Yeah, Alain Delon was definitely in Red Sun. Alain Delon, interesting actor as well. Things like The Samurai that he did with Melville, just fantastic cinema. Yeah, Matango is also on Tubi, I believe. I went down a rabbit hole of Tubi last night, and I ended up binge watching a whole bunch of episodes of Rowan and Martin's Laughing because all these cool actors were turning up. You get like Cliff Robertson and Doug McClure turning up on Laughing, and Tony Curtis and Zsa Zsa Gabor, and just incredible amounts of popular actors at the time. Kirk Douglas turns up on Laughing. The jokes don't necessarily land to a modern audience, but they have moments of whimsy and cuteness and wonderfulness. And I just went down a rabbit hole last night while I was chilling out after preparing this stuff that I've got here, and just watched Rowan and Martin's Laughing for hours and had a great time with it. Yep, Matungo is Attack of the Mushroom People on American television. Demon Seed. Yeah, I did a video about Demon Seed and about Robert Vaughn being a kind of rapey AI. Demon Seed's really weird because Julie Christie commits to the role in a beautiful way. Even though the concept was absurd as hell, Julie Christie brings her A game to the acting, as indeed did Chris Weaver. And Robert Vaughan's creepy, oily AI voice was just fantastic in Demon Seed. But I'll get on with a few of these movies. This one a lot of people love. This one a lot of people hate. Frank Darabont's adaptation of Stephen King's The Mist. Now, The Mist has a lot going for it. For a start, it's really good with Thomas Jane. Marcia Gay Harden playing the religious nut who gets caught in the supermarket when the mist comes in is fantastic. Marcia Gay Harden is an actress who doesn't get enough appreciation. But yeah, I like it. I like the ending. I think the ending was brave, and the ending really lands hard. And even Stephen King, who didn't write that ending, approved of it. A lot of people got pissed off with this movie, which means it's doing something right. Yeah, it missed a limited budget, but they did well with the practical effects and the CG effects, and just giving that kind of isolated community suddenly trapped by a mist full of monsters. Absolutely Alpha Wolf. The ending sold it. The ending was a gutsy ending that a lot of people wouldn't have gone with, and I'm sure the suits in the studio didn't like it at all. But Frank Darabont had the clout at the time to get it through. Do I have a copy of A Matter of Life and Death, Richard? Yes, I do. I've got the Criterion edition of it, and A Matter of Life and Death is fantastic. Mr. DJ Genzi, it's close to having a Half-Life movies you're getting. That's enough of that ending. Yeah, Carpenter's The Fog Over the Mist. Yeah, I can appreciate that. But for me, I think I like The Mist more. Mostly because of that acting and that ending. I think that I can like them both, and I do like Carpenter's The Fog. I like a lot of John Carpenter movies. In fact, today, if I get the time, I'm going to watch Vampires, which I bought a couple of videos ago. And I'm going to re-watch Vampires. I don't expect much of it. And I also picked up another one of Carpenter's more recent films. Just trying to remember which one it was. Just give me a sec. A really recent John Carpenter film. Let me have a look at his filmography here. The Ward from 2010, which I know nothing about. I'm not even going to look at the Wikipedia on it. But I picked it up for like $1. And because this is a John Carpenter film, of course I'm going to watch it. Vampires was good, says Clones of Clark. The Fog got panned by the critics, but it scared the bejesus out of me. Yeah, absolutely. Carpenter was good at that kind of thing. Love The Mist and A Matter of Life and Death, says Richard. Absolutely. I prefer watching The Mist in the black and white version. Haven't seen the black and white version, but I can appreciate how it would work because it'd have that Lovecraftian touch about it. Thomas Ian Griffith as a master is great. The Ward is pretty good, Alpha Wolf says. Good. I'm finding it hard to watch James Woods movies. Can't separate the art from the artist. Yeah, that's an ongoing thing in this channel. Is I have a real problem with that at times. I mean, it's a case by case basis with me, where you know that somebody in a movie is not the kind of person whose legacy you want to perpetuate, and yet there are some movies I'll watch and some movies I won't watch. And I think that for me, that's a real thing I struggle with. It's not an easy thing because of what I do. I dive deeply into a lot of the movies I watch, and I can't have the same engagement with them if I know that there's a rapey actor in there, or somebody who beat up women, or somebody who was egregiously abusive to children. Yeah, it doesn't let me do the deep dive into those movies the way I really want to, and so I tend to avoid them. It's a lot of it's got to do with my own personal history, but it really is an ongoing struggle. But Keith F says, not a massive fan of Carpenter's The Fog, not nearly his best. The original Danish version of The King was excellent. The remake was awful. Remakes often are. They're not always. The Maltese Falcon was a remake of something that had been made twice before. So I'm not going to kind of say all remakes are bad, but on a percentage basis, they tend to be lesser works. Klaus Kinski, yeah, absolutely fine. Moon 42. Um, yeah. Uh, yeah, Keith, John Wayne movies. Yeah, there are some John Wayne movies I watch, but I mostly watch it for the other actors. Carpenter science fiction movies are interesting. Yeah, I like Ghosts of Mars. A lot of people hate it. It's a western set on Mars. What's not to love about it? But yeah, I think John Carpenter is one of those directors that if you like genre films, it's hard not to love John Carpenter. He's an original thinker. He did some really classic films, and even his lesser films are interesting. I don't think that his remake of Village of the Damned is particularly a high point in his career, but I like so many of his other movies. But we'll move on to another deep cut, which I love. Out of all proportion to the film, again, this is a cinema cult one, which you pick up quite cheaply here. I love cinema cult stuff as well. Anthology, I like body bags, absolutely. If you don't like John Wayne, there's a scene you love in Repo, absolutely. I've known this scene Friday. I've been trying to watch Christine on TV for ages. Yeah, Christine, I like. I've never seen Memoirs of the Invisible Man since College. I wondered if it deserves the rep it has. There's an interesting thing because William Goldman wrote the script for the Memoirs of the Invisible Man. And in one of his books, I think it might be Adventures of the Screen Trade, he talks about why it was such a dog's breakfast. Most of that had to do with Chevy Chase's ego. And Chevy Chase is the person who turned it into a piece of shit. But anyway, to get on with a horror movie that I like, from the 90s, directed by Peter Hyams, starring Thomas Sizemore and Penelope Ann Miller. The Relic. Great monster, fantastic actors, good locations, works really well as a horror movie. It's just in my sweet spot, that VHS era horror. The Cthulhu, the movie monster in this is original and really terrifying. It's like having an intelligent six-legged rhino running amok in a museum. Absolutely, Jack Swin. The Relic is a movie to love. I mean, I love it. Linda Hunt's in there as well. A whole bunch of other people. It has a really specific location, the Natural History Museum in Chicago. Yeah, a really annoyed rhino. Absolutely, Mr. Diaz Genzi. But it works well. And it's got people like James Whitmore in it, who was in the original Them. It's got a nice little bit by Audra Lindley playing a very sarcastic coroner. There's lots of little grace moments of wonderfulness in this film, which I really appreciate. Absolutely, Friday. It's a great movie. It took you by surprise just how good it was. Absolutely. And this is again is a bare bones one. It's on Blu-ray, so it's a good transfer. But yeah, just a movie to love. And it's got a high rewatchability. That's something I'm looking at more with movies that I'm reviewing. Is how rewatchable is it? Am I capable of just really appreciating it again and again? And some movies don't land that well once you know the twist or the surprise. M. Night Shyamalan's movies are like that. Once you know the twist, they're not as much fun. But movies like The Relic really do have that long tail to them. Does the mayor's wife get eaten in that? Yeah, I think she does. What happened to Tom Sizemore? He died recently. He had a lot of substance abuse issues, and really, that killed his career. And that kind of disease of addiction that he had really knocked him. He was a good actor, but his demons overcame him eventually. But yeah, in this one, he's good. I like him in a lot of things. He was very good in Saving Private Ryan, for instance. But again, like Philip Seymour Hoffman, he's one of those actors who died too soon because of those drug addictions. Yeah, Red Planet is it's a great watch. I like Red Planet. Val Kilmer on Mars. You got to love that, and that kind of Jaguar robot is fantastic. I think that was filmed in South Australia. But Red Planet, I think, is underrated. But yeah, it's just so many good movies like The Relic out there, which people don't give enough oxygen to. Sputnik was a good Russian science fiction horror. It's just 5 moving forward you. I hear good things about it. I'm going to have to try it. I'm going to open a link to that because I do want to try and find a copy of it. From 2020, Russian horror film. I think I'm going to have to try to find a copy of that one. Mr. D says, I have the Red Planet soundtrack just for Gabriel's theme song. Absolutely. There are a few genre films that are perfect, hit all the beats. Tremors, yeah, absolutely. Galaxy Quest, yep. Big Trouble in Little China, endlessly rewatchable. Absolutely, I love Big Trouble in Little China. I think that Kirk Douglas doing that kind of John Wayne pastiche works. The whole ensemble works. Uh, Big Trouble in Little China is just such fun. If anybody tries to remake it, I'll be very unhappy because I don't think it needs it. Sizemore ended up having to do science fiction channel movies. Absolutely. He did an adult film as well because he was that far down on his luck. If you like Life, you like Sputnik. Didn't particularly like Life, but I will watch Sputnik because Life didn't really do it for me. I think that I was ahead of the movie and ahead of the plot twist in the movie, and I think that diminished it for me. What do I think of the anti-Semitic accusations they made about Carpenter's They Live? I don't think that the analogy is with um, Jewish people and non-Jewish people. And that I think they may be reaching too far. Just give me a sec. I'm going to make a noise. I don't think it was about that. I think it was about the rich versus the poor and about capitalism as it was in the 80s. And that isn't a kind of race thing. Am I a fan of the Dune movies books? Yeah, I am. I want to see the second Denis Villeneuve Dune movie. I even liked the David Lynch one. I appreciated the first one. I think the first one of Denis Villeneuve's Dune movies was a setup for the main plot, but I think incredible visual imagination and incredible evocation of a strange world. And yeah, I've seen the trailer for the second part of Denis Villeneuve's Dune movie, and I'm looking forward to that. I think it works really well. Let's see. Carpenter's idea was the aliens came to Earth, but they were Republicans. From an interview with Carpenter, actually, I can see that. Right. It's about the perils of capitalism. 100%. Aldo Ray was another actor who ended up having to do soft porn movies because he needed the money for medical bills. Yeah, Murdersville. I kind of have a befuddlement with America and the fact that basic things like medical care are not taken care of. I'm not going to go into that much, but from our point of view here, it seems inexplicable that a country would do that. Let's have a. I wasn't expecting the recent Dune movie to be good, but it was. Keith, absolutely. I love what Denis Villeneuve does with his cinema. Mr. D. Stingy, long beige setup. It's set on a sand planet. It's going to be beige. Jim was great, and the young star can carry absolutely. Timothy Chalamet can carry a movie. He really. I want to see what he does in the future. I think he's going to have a long and interesting career as an actor. Mr. Londell's Groovy Movies. If you saw the Villeneuve first Dune movie, you definitely have to see the second, just so you see the full story. Absolutely. I think Denis Villeneuve did the right thing by pacing the movie right and pacing the story right. because it is a big saga. It's not just a one-off film and then you go away. Finally, forward to my favorite review of a film, June and Sting, the only person out acted by his underpants. Yeah, Sting isn't gifted as an actor, and I think that the visual style of Lynch's June is interesting, but it does have a lot of flaws. I think the technology wasn't quite up to his vision. Plain O'Clock. I think I'm going to watch Iola Mia, 1972 from Deeper Film Studios, East German, not Russian. Heard good things about them, but I haven't um, seen it yet, but I really will. Alpha War says, I hate that about movies today, though I'm not sure what that's in reference to. Friday says, in the UK, the policing concept was the B feature for June. Things spoke a lot more than in the main feature. That's a really odd double feature, even though they both have Sting in them. Oh, June, okay. Yeah, I don't mind the fact that June's two parts. Eventually, you're going to see them both together. They're going to put out a double Blu-ray or 4K release, and you'll see the whole lot as one thing. But it needed to be longer than a movie could be. And even though some people don't like that, I think that it's important to honor the story and to do it that way. But yeah, Alpha says, but everything gets drawn out. June is just the latest. I think that the story of June, though, justifies it. You can cut out so much. You can cut out so much of the original work when you're making a movie that you lose what's good about the original work. And I think that's the peril with June. By trying to cram too much in, you're really at risk of losing what made you make the movie of that story in the first place. But well, I will tell you this: I did once watch David Lynch's June while dropping acid, and it was a wonderful experience. But that's all I'm going to say about that. Yeah, it's I think it's a question to be asked, and I think it's something you evaluate movie by movie on whether a two-parter is better than just a one-parter. But I think if it's an honest story, you've got to respect that. Keith F, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole of Star Wars, but yeah, it's I'm not disagreeing with you. I'll put it that way. Middle-aged geek girl gets mad at me if I talk too much about my feelings about Star Wars, so I won't do that. Middle-aged geek girl says, "Don't do drugs, kids," in capital letters. She's shouting. As a miniseries, I wouldn't have had the budget they have now. I can't wait. I can wait for part two. Eric says, "Yeah, I mean, I think that Denis Villeneuve, after the second Dune movie, probably needs to move on to other projects because I want to see what else he's got to say as well as seeing that second half of that Dune film." What do I think of Renfield Cayenne? I haven't seen it, but I want to. I think that Nicolas Cage is in an interesting place. He's paid off his debts now. He did a lot of really crap movies to pay off debts he had, but he's got to that stage now where he's doing fun projects for himself. And him and Nicholas Hoult seem to have a really nice rapport as actors. And I do want to see Renfield. I don't have incredibly high expectations. However, I think it's going to be a fun watch. Friday says Renfield was fun. Yeah, I will see it absolutely, and maybe we'll review it. Maybe, maybe not. Depends on what I've got going. But Blade Runner fans are at least mixed on Deneuve's sequel, though. I kind of like the sequel more than I like Blade Runner. I know that that's heresy, but I think the world building is better. That little piece with Dave Bautista in it works well. I don't know that the world building holds together with the two Blade Runner movies very much. Yeah, they're beautiful to look at and they're spectacular, but I'm not sure that I believe in their world in that sense. Yeah, Heresy. I do Heresy here, Alpha Wolf. It's part of the brand is to do heretical things about movies. Ken says, I only like Cajun adaptation of Mandy. I think it was very good in The Color of Outer Space. Richard Hart says, just watch Renfield, great. Lynch's Dune is exquisite. Yeah, I mean, I liked Lynch's Dune before I saw it with Alter Perceptions, and I liked it afterwards. The Alter Perceptions was a fun ride where I was trying to figure out the length of a sandworm in metric and failing miserably. But the soundtrack to Lynch's Dune is kind of interesting too. Eric says, I hope Renfield is as good as Dark Shadows. Yes, I like Dark Shadows. I didn't like Dark Shadows. Um, I did the one Tim Burton movie that I hate with a passion is the version of Sweeney Todd that he did with Johnny Depp because it totally butchered Sondheim's original musical, which I've seen on stage twice. And having a light tenor sing the role of Sweeney Todd, living aside Johnny Depp's problematic aspects, having a light tenor rather than a deep, rich, angry baritone playing Sweeney Todd in the Sondheim musical is a very big mistake. Mr. D said, I watched Primal this week. It was a very fun movie. It does a bit different than most of the movies I do. I will watch Primal, but I haven't got a chance to yet. Let's see. I would have liked to have seen an Alejandro Jodorowsky version of it. Yeah, Jodorowsky's Dune. That's a good documentary. I would have liked to have seen it too because the casting was crazy. Having Orson Welles playing Baron Harkonnen, beautiful idea. Let's see. Douglas Carter says, really good late career performance. Charles Bronson is in The Indian Runner, directed by Sean Penn. Haven't seen it, but I probably should. Eric agrees with me about Sweeney Todd. Never liked the original Dark Shadows, but the creator also did Kolchak. Yeah, funny. Ed Wood is easily Burton's best film. I know that Middle Aged Gecko was a big Tim Burton fan. Fireman 42 saw Zardos on shrooms. I was surprised how brilliant concept made before the technology was available to realize it properly. Hot as Dune, all 13 hours of glorious 3D CGI. Yeah, it would have been great. Ed Wood is one of my favorite movies, says FG. Primal has a white Jaguar. That's not what's it look like. I see what you mean. The Nightmare Before Christmas wasn't directed by Tim Burton. It was directed by Henry Selick, middle-aged geek girl. Tim Burton did a lot of the work on it. Damien, morning, Terry. It's cold and wet in Perth. Yeah, hi, Damien. Damien's in Perth, so he's like 2.5 to 3 hours behind us on the in time zones. Zardos was good science fiction. Zardos was crazy. I mean, I'm not sure it holds up as science fiction. It holds up as world building and the kind of science fantasy thing, but it's mad. Middle aged Google says it's still classed as a burden. Yeah, that's because people don't know how many self directed it. But yeah, so much good stuff. I'll go with the last movie I've got here. Burton's Batman is better than Schumacher's. Yeah, but it's worse than later Batman movies. And Darkman is a better Batman movie than the Tim Burton Batman movies, from my point of view. But Connery was a man that has to be seen. Absolutely. Um, Connery did some interesting films. He did a comedy where he's playing a mad American poet in A Fine Madness with Gene Seberg, which I kind of like, even though it's bad. Damien says, I love the original Dark Shadows TV series and all three films. Okay, cool. This one I had to put in because people forget it's a horror movie because it's a comedy. Young Frankenstein with Gene Wilder and Peter Boyle and Marty Feldman and Cloris Leachman and Terry Garr and Madeline Kahn. Mel Brooks at his best. Beautiful pastiche of the original Universal horror films. It has the look and the style down pat. And I love Young Frankenstein for middle-aged giggles is putting on the ridge. Yeah, the Young Frankenstein, eminently rewatchable and silly and fun and playful. It's yeah, it's got to be put into one of those horror movies that I love because it is. And the more you know about the old school Universal horror films, the funnier that is. It's it just works. And Kenneth Mars playing the local burgomaster, just so many nice bits in Young Frankenstein. They put the candle back. Abby Normal. Let's see. Yeah, Frank says Nightmare Before Christmas was marketed as a Burton movie. Same with Poltergeist as a Spielberg movie. Kane says Holy Mountain gets my vote for the craziest film I've ever seen. Absolutely. Frankenstein, yeah. Yeah, Gene Hackman was great in that too. Gene Hackman, seeing the minor roles that Gene Hackman did in particularly the 60s and when he did minor roles in other things, fantastic range. I love what Gene Hackman did all of his smaller roles as well as the big one. Yeah, Mel Brooks loved the original novel as almost maybe it is. Mel Brooks did so many movies that I loved. He did obscure things like The 12 Chairs because he liked the original story. And he produced things like The Elephant Man. He was the producer on The Elephant Man. When Mel Brooks does die, there's going to be such an interest. There's going to be such a flood of love for all the things he did, both on TV and in cinema, that it's going to be incredibly sad, but it'll be a great opportunity to reevaluate his legacy. The outtakes from Young Frankenstein are fun. Mel Brooks, Life Stinks. I like Life Stinks. I think Life Stinks was a kind of fun movie, mocking the rich, and I'm always in favour of movies that mock the rich. Everyone knows that. Gene Hackman is 93 years old and still drives a car and rides his bike. Yeah, he retired when he wanted to, in the same way that Jack Nicholson did. And somebody posted a picture of Jack Nicholson standing on his balcony in sweatshirt and t-shirt. Cut the guy some slack. I think that there are actors who know when their instrument isn't what it was, and they don't want to kind of leave a legacy of shitty older films. And Gene Hackman did that. Jack Nicholson's done that as well. I think that there's a wisdom in knowing when you need to move forward. And I think that both Hackman and Nicholson did that. Todd says, love high anxiety. I love high anxiety as well. Have I seen, is a Prime Cut or Prime Cuts? I think it's Prime Cut with Gene Hackman and Lee Marvin. Yeah, I've seen Prime Cut. I saw it in the cinema in the day. Really interesting crime film, done from a fantastic viewpoint, and a solid action film as well. Yeah, Blue Silver Ball did give the world Star Trek. I think that she had an interesting career as well when she reinvented herself for television, and it paid off enormously. Not necessarily a nice person, but it paid off enormously. Yeah, when things are rotten, I like it when things are rotten, which is a precursor to Robin Hood Men in Tights. But with Dick Gautier, when things were rotten, was a great TV show that Mel Brooks produced. Of course, he also did Get Smart and a few other things. But yeah, that kind of Robin Hood pastiche that he did in the 70s was a lot of fun. It had a great ensemble cast, and it played things at just the right level and kept that Mel Brooks sensitivity. But yeah, Young Frankenstein, terrific film. Let me see if I've got anything else that I missed here. There's a movie I don't have a copy of that I want to talk about. Spaceballs, the animated series. Never seen it. Lucille Ball commissioned Star Trek after a conversation with Carol Lombard. Carol Lombard died in the 1940s. History of Part 2 was very hit and miss. Yeah, it was. But it was intended to be TV. Misty Rose Maid Marian was great. Jeff Connor says, yeah, absolutely. Do I think Tarantino will stick to his promise not to direct any more films? I don't know. I like Tarantino's films. I like the idea of him doing a movie about the film critic Pauline Kael, which he says is going to be his last film. Yeah, I would like to see more from him. There's nothing to say he's not going to do a streaming series. There's nothing to say he's not going to do documentary work as well. So when he says he's not going to make more movies, I think he's going to stay in the industry. He's going to stay in projects. But I'm looking forward to seeing this movie he's in pre-production for about Pauline Kael, the film critic. I think there's enormous possibility there. But let me have a look. Imprint brings out Gene Hackman box set. Will be interesting. Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a lot of good stuff that Imprint are bringing out, and my video tomorrow is about one of those. There's a box set of 5 films they just put out, which so hits my sweet spot of cinema appreciation that I am immensely happy that they did that. Time for another drink. By the way, I've got to be commercial about this. See that little dollar sign underneath the chat? Super chats are welcome. If anybody wants to donate, happy to do it. Then I can buy that Ray Dennis Stickler box set. But yeah, so the other horror movie I was going to talk about, and I'm going to post a link to its Wikipedia page, is an anthology horror movie that Vincent Price did in the 1960s. And it's not one of his Edgar Allan Poe ones. It's a thing called Twice Told Tales. And there's the wiki link to it. And I like it for the middle one of the 3 stories. The first story is Dr. Heidecker's Experiment, which is about a couple of old friends who are old guys who discover a source of immortality, which ultimately leads to tragedy. The third one is The House of Seven Gables, which is about a family curse, and I don't like it. But the second story, with Vincent Price, Brett Halsey, and Joyce Taylor, is called Rappaccini's Daughter. And I saw this when I was a kid, and I loved it. It's about Bianca Rappaccini, a young woman who's kept in a walled garden in kind of medieval Italy. And her father, Giacomo, has found a way to protect his daughter from the world. He has made her poisonous to everything. He's slowly dosed her with poison over the years. And if she touches any living thing, she kills it. And meanwhile, a young man spies her across the garden wall, and they kind of fall in love. But she's got this curse of being incredibly poisonous to any living thing, which her father has done to her in order to keep her where he wants her. It's a story of abuse as much as anything, but it's beautifully told. It's a romantic little love story based on a Nathaniel Hawthorne story, as indeed are all 3 of the stories in Twice Told Tales. But Rappaccini's Daughter impressed me at the time. I think it's a sweet story, and it's also a story of abuse. And I don't think it gets enough oxygen when people are talking about Vincent Price anthology movies. And I think it should. I don't have a physical copy of it. I saw it on a streaming service. It may have been Tubi or something like that. But I saw it originally in the 70s, and I like it. I don't think it's the best anthology series in the world, but I think it's honest, and there's a bit of subtext there that I find very interesting. Mr. Londell's Groovy Movies, Twice Told Tales, decent late night movies for sleepless nights. Yeah, another horror anthology from Price I haven't seen this year is The Monster Club. I like The Monster Club. The Monster Club works really well for me. Danny McGee says, I'll remember that Vincent Price. Yeah, looking forward to your 40s movie chat tomorrow. Going to a 40s and 50s rewatch. Arsenic and Old Lace Inherit the Wind, Bad Day at Blackrock. Todd says, I remember Monster Club. I'll give you the hint, and I did it early on the stream. The anthology series that Imprint are putting out is Arabian Nights movies. A whole bunch of them, all of which are interesting, 3 of which I love. and they're just putting it out now, and it is just my sweet spot as far as adventure movies are concerned. I think Price was one. Murdersville, thank you very much for the £5. Have a fiver toward the set. Thank you very much. Yeah, Talking Pictures is a great movie channel. I haven't seen it. Let's have a look here. Sounds interesting. Never mad about Price as an actor. Price could be very good in some things. I think he did a stage show about Oscar Wilde that was incredibly well regarded. And I think that if you cherry pick the movie career of Vincent Price, there are some movies where he does really well. The Last Man on Earth, the version of the Richard Matheson story, I Am Legend. Price in that, even though it's a low budget Italian version of it, it's truly fantastic. He gives us the agony of being the last uninfected man on this planet full of vampires / zombies. And I love the way he does it. KN, check out Which Finder General Price's best performance. I agree, Todd. Twice Told Tales is available to buy or for rent on Prime Video. Thanks, Franny. Twice Told Tales, like I said, it's not the best anthology series, but I really like Rappaccini's Daughter. I think it's a nice adaptation, and Price as the toxic father is good in that too. Let's have a look here. Now, does anybody want to see my vulgar pleasure? It's a kind of adult film, but I like it because it's sweet. I'm putting that aside until I hear it. Last Man on Earth is so much better than the Mega Man and the Will Smith movie. Doug, absolutely, I agree. I think it's a more honest, grounded adaptation. And the sets around Rome, sorry, and the locations around Rome, The Last Man on Earth, give it a slightly futuristic, slightly different viewpoint as well. And yeah, I mean, Vincent Price, I love so many things. Gourmet chef. He brought art appreciation to the masses as well in America in the 1960s. Really an interesting man. Damien says, I watched Vincent Price in an episode of Daniel Boone. Never liked Daniel Boone in the series because I think that Fess Parker was a kind of charisma void. Any charisma around him got sucked into the negative charisma of that guy. Friday says, I'm going to have to love the Mega Man for the 70s music. Eric says, Bad Day Black Rock is in my top 10 list. He walks life for a heavy man. That's when I knew Borgnine was out of his league. Yeah, and there's so many good quotes in Bad Day Black Rock. I'm going to find one of them. Because there's a movie quote in Bad Day Black Rock that I think speaks to contemporary times much more than so many things. I mean, there's the bit where McCready says to Cole, the Ernest Borgnine character, you're not only wrong, you're wrong at the top of your voice. And let me have a look here. I'm just trying to find this fantastic quote, because I want to get it exactly right. Okay. Sorry if this is a bit dull, but I so want to get this quote right because it has been brought up. Yeah, McCready's talking to Liz Worth, the character played by Anne Francis. He says, I don't care anything about Black Rock. It just seems to me that there aren't many towns like this in America. But one town is like it is enough. And because I think something kind of bad happened here, Miss Worth, something I quite can't seem to find the handle on. And then he says, I know this much. The rule of law has left here, and the guerrillas have taken over. And I love that. I love that. There's a poetry to his outrage about what's happening at Black Rock that I really appreciate, and it's grounded, and it talks to so many times in so many places. Director of which one, John, was a talent, Mike Hodges. Yep. Fess Parker was okay in them, yeah, but then he didn't have much to do in them. Let's have a look here. Yeah, there is a quote from Witchfinder General. Can't remember which actor said it, but it said they all had to up their game to play against Tracy. Yeah, Spencer and Tracy lifted everybody around him because they wanted to do their best work because they were working with Spencer and Tracy. Again, somebody else who had that disease of alcoholism. But he created so many characters that weren't paradigms. They were always flawed people, but they were people who overcame their flaws. And going through the filmography of Spencer Tracy, I loved him in The Old Man and the Sea, a really low budget adaptation of the Hemingway story. And he is fantastic in that. He really, he was in a movie called The Mountain as well, which Imprint put out recently, where he plays an older mountain climber whose brother is played by Robert Wagner. And in that one, he is just so grounded as well. Kane says, I'm watching Razorhead on VHS, and that baby is seriously disturbing. Absolutely. Yeah, Michael Reeves, that's who it was. Yeah, you're right, Michael Reeves. Speaking of Anne Francis, I've been having so much fun rewatching the Honey West series, Monteval said. Yeah, Honey West is fun, and Anne Francis' character in that doesn't take shit from guys. I love that kind of integrity to the character, which makes it play so well to a modern audience. So let's see. Does anybody want to see the somewhat adult film that I think is cute and watchable, even though it is an adult film? I dug it out of the archive because I had a folder of DVDs that are adult, but this one I've got to recommend. Mr. D says, bring on a watch. Jeff Connor says, agree about Omega Man music. Found it so dynamic. Flash, no, it's not Flash Gordon. Flash Gordon I like too. This one is Alice in Wonderland with Christine DeBelle in it. Now, this comes from a particular sweet spot of 1970s adult cinema. I'm not going to hold it up too much, but here's the reason why I love it. Wait. It's a musical. It tells the story of a shy librarian called Alice who goes down the rabbit hole, goes to Wonderland, meets a whole bunch of, let's say, unusual people. And there are a whole bunch of songs. There's dancing. There's there are adult scenes in it, but it plays innocently in a very unusual way. In the same way, and somebody mentioned this to me on the channel comments, in the same way that a movie called The First Nudie Musical that Bruce Kimmel made plays innocently, even though it's got full frontal nudity and singing and dancing in it. Mr. Diastengi, yeah, that one downloaded it a few months ago because it's interesting and it came out liking the songs. Todd, I don't know if it's difficult to find, but it's a sweet musical. There were a few musical adult films made, not many, and most of them were softcore. But there was a kind of thing in the 70s where some of the filmmakers wanted adult movies to be movies. They wanted to be proper films with adult stuff in them, but still with the same production values and with the same aesthetic as proper films. There were films like the opening of Misty Beethoven, which is basically My Fair Lady done as an adult film. There are a whole bunch of them. And Colin Clark, there are a lot of adult musical fairy tale type stories in the 70s. And it was an interesting moment before VHS came in, before streaming came in, and ruined that part of the industry. There was this moment where they would be being taken seriously as cinema. And that is a road not taken, let's say, by society. For me, it's a fascinating thing. Yes, they're prurient, but the argument, which has been made by a number of people, is that you can watch horror movies and be scared shitless. You can be terrified, your heart races, your bowels go loose. You get genuinely scared by a good, scary horror movie. That's okay, but it's not okay for a movie to induce sexual arousal. That's not allowed. And that seems odd. They're both emotional, physiological reactions you have to cinema, but one's okay and one's not. And I find that dichotomy an interesting cultural thing that we have. Middle-aged kid girl. 70 softcore will be tamer now than what is on most HBO series. Not quite, but I understand what you're saying. Ken says, like Burt Reynolds' character in Boogie Nights, he wanted to make films. Yeah, absolutely. And that was because there was that passion to make films and to make adult films that were cinema, which was a part of the industry in the 1970s. Murdersville says, it's a fine line between bawdy and cringe. Absolutely. And I think that that's a kind of interesting thing. I mean, there were things like the Emmanuel movies, which were very popular among couples, and Deep Throat was seen by couples a lot. It's Hour of the Pig blends that well. I'm not sure about Hour of the Pig. Let me look that up for us. Excuse me. I'll go down the rabbit hole later, but Don't Look Now had one of the most realistic sex scenes from it. Yeah, absolutely, and that scene is important because this is a couple that had lost a child, and they're trying to reconnect with each other post that tragedy, and that scene between Julie Christie and Donald Sutherland really grounds the characters, in a way that could not have been done as well by other means. Yeah, I'm not sure whether they actually had sex for real. I think that that's part of the mythology, and neither party has admitted it. So, yeah, but Don't Look Now, great ending, beautiful evocation of the obsession of the Donald Sutherland character, particularly, and that kind of grief process. It's yeah, I really have to rewatch that one. I've got a copy of it, but I haven't rewatched it in a long time, and I think I'm going to have to go into it. Even knowing that ending, I think the build up and the piece by piece plotting of it works well. Cinderella, 1977. Yeah, absolutely, Mr. DSN. And there was a thing called Fairy Tales, which doesn't play as well. There are a whole bunch of them, and I think if somebody put out a box set of those, I'd be tempted to get it. All of those silly, cute, playful adult films, some hard and some not so hard, and I use that advisedly. Yeah, they're kind of interesting, and it's yeah, it is really is an alternate universe where things, if had they happened differently, would have really taken cinema into a twilight zone or maybe a Black Mirror of adult films being accepted as cinema. Uh, I'm not used to these live streams now. It's 9:43, so I'm hour and 43 minutes in, and my throat's going. I may have to get another espresso after this. Mr. D says, yeah, I've been watching the Confession series too. I'm old and I like it. Are they the ones with they're the Timmy Lee ones? The ones with Robin Asquith in it? There are a whole bunch of English movies that were crazily popular and were basically about the romantic adventures of working class lads. Yeah, finally, for you. Yeah, it's in fact there's been box sets of those already, but yeah, I think that the ones that play well to modern audiences are the ones that are even-handed about gender. Thank you, Mr. Diascenzi. But things like the Manuel movies were really interesting because they were about the woman's sexuality more than the guys, and about the woman discovering who she is and what she likes more than they were about the guys. And that was a kind of interesting aspect to those films. Burt Reynolds was a good actor too. Just watch Deliverance for Burt Reynolds being a good actor. He was a good actor. I think that he went for the cash way too much. He was good in Sharky's Machine. I love Burt Reynolds in Sharky's Machine, which he directed, and which has one of the great needle drop soundtracks of the 1980s. Yeah, Tony Blair's father-in-law was in the Confession Series. He was. Anthony Booth. He was in that one as well. But Keith Harris says Julie Christie was a beautiful lady who could act. The two don't often go together. And she was so much a part of that 1960s Carnaby Street pop culture that changed English cinema for a long time. Yeah, I talked about Sharky's Machines on a previous video. Sharky's Machine. I've got the soundtrack album. I've also got the movie. And it works well as a crime movie. And it's got those gritty locations and some really good stunts. And it's got interesting actors too. Brian Keith's in it. Charles Durning's in it. Victoria Gassman is in it as well. Rachel Ward's in it. Just so much cool. Daryl Hickman's in it. Just so much coolness in Sharky's Machine, as well as some really tense and gritty sequences as well. Yeah, Eric says, Stick surprised me in a good way. Yeah, there were a few of them. Stick was good as well. Based on an Elmore Leonard novel, Stick was. But yeah, it's they're just Burt. I mean, I got that box of Burt box set, which didn't have his best movies in it, but it was a nice sampler plate of Burt Reynolds movies. The one that Umbrella put out recently, which had Stroker Ace in it and things like that, and the Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. Just watched Burt in a film called Heat. It appeared it was a flop, but I liked it. Yeah, I mean, I think here's the problem Burt Reynolds had in his career. He'd make the good old boy movies like Stroker Ace and Smokey and the Bandit. And they made beaucoup money for him. They were crazy and popular. He was one of the most popular actors in Hollywood at the time. But when he wanted to do the stuff that he liked, which was the Sharks Machines and the Stick and Hustle and all of those ones, they didn't make much money. But they were better films, looked at objectively. And he always kind of bounced between doing the really popular good old boy stuff and doing these other ones. And obviously he aged out of his career at some stage, but he really did do some fascinating films, and films that reevaluated now stand up incredibly well. Yeah, the Michael Mann one, Clayton, absolutely. The Michael Mann Heat was a tour de force of kind of crime cinema. City Heat and Redicott are excellent too. I haven't seen those for a long time. But yeah, that the kind of mid-career Burt Reynolds film. If you cherry pick out all of the stuff where there were Confederate flags on the tops of cars, you're going to find a solid filmography of entertaining action cinema and character cinema as well. Sharky's Machines, at least, as much about the character of Sharky as it is about the crimes and the abusive bastards who turn out to be the head criminals. Really interesting film, and I will always be a fan of it. So we've got a little bit of time. We've got 11 minutes left. Any Q&As? Sorry. Any questions that people want to ask me? Because it's always nice doing a Q&A. I find it stretches me out to answer questions that come in from left field. So I'm happy to do a bit of a question and answer for the last bit of the live stream. Just waiting for the chat to wake up. Okay, I've got so many tabs open here. Well, I don't think a man's to keep. I think it's got good actors in it. I think that It probably needed more money thrown at it. I'm going to have to rewatch the Gift. I haven't watched it in a couple of decades, but I keep kind of finding it on streaming media and kind of bookmarking it, but I haven't watched it. Who's my favourite wife? Middle-aged gig girl says. Mine or someone else's? What film do I dread a remake of? If anybody was ever going to remake a Jacques Demy musical, like The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, or Les Demoiselles de Rochefort, or even Donkey Skin, I'd be very pissed off with it because I think those movies are just so integral. Or even lesser Jacques Demy movies like Lola with Anouk Aimée. And those ones. The Keep is better than the book. Okay. Who's your favourite character actor? No, not a movie star whose name. I did a video, Keith, of about Thelma Ritter, who was nominated for 6 supporting actress Oscars and never won one. And it's one of my most popular videos. If you search in the channel for Thelma Ritter, you're going to see that Thelma Ritter is my favourite character actor. Breaking is another good later Reynolds movie. Better Timothy Dalton 007 film, Living Daylights or License to Kill? I think Living Daylights, because I think Living Daylights had a more romantic heart to it. I like License to Kill, but I think Robert Darby wasn't a particularly good Bond villain. But I think I'm going to have to go with Living Daylights. That works better for me. No, she wasn't talking about Cary Grant films, David. Nightmare movies. Yeah, Nightmare movies. Yeah, it's a Kim Newman movie about nightmare movies. Kim Newman book. And you should read Kim Newman's books about movies as well as his fiction. Thelma Ritter is exceptional, though. Are 3D movies dead? I think 3D movies are a fad that comes and goes every now and then. I don't think cinema particularly needs them because now that we've got FPV drones, you can fly through things anyway, and you get the sense of 3D without having to wear glasses on. Phil McGrath is great in winner. Favorite character actor Lee J. Cobb. Yeah, Lee J. Cobb was good. Lee Jacoby, what's his name? Lee Jacoby. But what's the favorite movie? The sequel was better than the original film. You can always go to the classic ones. Aliens is a good one. Let me think. Sequels that are better than the original movies. That's a tough one, but I'm going to have to go with Aliens. I think that works well. And I've gone totally blank. I really apologize for that, Friday. But I think that sequels where they Paddington 2, absolutely. Middle-aged gig girl, thank you. Paddington 2. I haven't seen Paddington 1, but from everything I hear, I love Paddington 2. Mostly because Knuckles McGinty, played wonderfully by Brendan Gleeson, is one of my favourite characters in movies. Alien is better than Aliens? Alien's a haunted house movie on a spaceship. Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Thank you, Alpha Wolf. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Best prequel. Gremlins 2, Empire Strikes Back. What got me into movies? My uncles. My uncles took me to see This Island Earth. And then when I was a teenager and had a very abusive childhood, cinemas were a sanctuary for me when I was a kid. My father would dump us in the Saturday matinees so he could go drinking at the local pub. And so for me, cinemas were always sanctuaries, and that's what got me into cinema as a way of putting away the outside world, which was incredibly difficult for a child to deal with in my circumstance. And so movies were for me seeing a different part of the world too, seeing different things, seeing places I hadn't been to, and seeing other possibilities, and just being entertained without needing to look over my shoulder or cringe was just so important to me as a kid. Let's have a look here. The thing. Have I ever walked out of a movie before the end? Keith F., if you look up Suspiria on my channel, I did a video about why I walked out of Argento Suspiria when I saw it in cinema. Interesting story. and I went back to it. So you might want to look that one. Thank you, Mr. Diaz Gen Z. Franny says, adored, yeah, absolutely. Saturday matinees were a safe space. Music and movies are the best, yeah. That's it. I saw some Saturday matinees at my local, the Regent Theatre, Regal in Liverpool, New South Wales. They showed weird things. I mean, showing a whole bunch of kids the Matt Helm films with all of the kind of innuendo and stuff like that, and it was kind of an interesting choice. But we got to see films like Valley of Gwangi. We got to see a whole bunch of weird Euro spy movies and German crimi films. They just put any B picture that they could get cheaply into the Saturday matinees, and kids got dumped with that stuff a lot. We saw a lot of monster movies. We saw a lot of crime films. Saw way too many Elvis musicals. Yeah, Clayton, I've got the film films. Eric says Fred Astaire or Gene Kelly. Recognizing Fred Astaire's genius. I like the muscularity of Gene Kelly's dancing. And I like the fact that he made some interesting films on his own bat, like Invitation to a Dance and things like that. I think for me, Gene Kelly. What movie should have been made in 3D? Deep Throat and Behind the Green Door. Toby says the Flint movies are great. Absolutely. I like them. And I like, from a modern viewpoint, James Coburn's Derek Flint, who's polyamorous. He's living with three women at the same time and encouraging their own individual careers. Really interesting from a modern viewpoint. Citizen Kane, starring Nicolas Cage, directed by the guy who did Thor Ragnarok, Taika Waititi. I would actively hunt down anybody who made that film. I would go totally Liam Neeson in Taken on anybody who made that film. Damien says, Saturday Matinee in New Zealand did the same. Elvis followed by Kung Fu films. Yeah, that works. Xanadu, Alpha Wolf, hate Xanadu. Hate it with a passion. Gene Kelly's worst movie. But we can agree to disagree. Channing Tatum or Gene Kelly's middle-aged kid girl. I think they each do what they do well. James Coburn was cool in Flint. He was a polymath genius. He was like a groovy 1960s Doc Savage. Really worked out. Clayton says, I walked out of Xanadu. Yeah. Olivia Newton-John, for all of her virtues, and she did a lot of good things in her life, including opening a cancer clinic, which is still going here in Australia. Couldn't act. She couldn't act her way out of a parking ticket. Nonetheless, good singer, did a lot of good work in her life. My favourite silent film, possibly Metropolis or The Golem. I like both of those. Cabinet of Dr. Caligari I like. And that's kind of German impressionist films are my silent movie ones. Xanadu was adorable like strong cheese. No, it's weak cheese. We used to get Hammer films at our local Saturday matinee. So good, John Pieces. Yeah, we had a cinema here in Sydney in Sydney where I used to live, called The Star in Bondi Junction, which turned itself into a horror movie cinema for about a year. It was owned by a big cinema chain called Hoyt's. And they put all of the available Hammer and Amicus films in there. I used to travel like 50 kilometres on train to go and see these movies I couldn't see any other way at the Star at Bondi Junction. And it was a good opportunity. And they actually decorated this old Art Deco cinema. It wasn't a big one, but an old Art Deco cinema with dummies dressed up like Frankenstein's monster and the mummy in the hallways of the cinema. How genuinely scary is the silent Phantom of the Opera? Yeah, it works. Lon Chaney was brilliant at what he did. It would have been great if he had lived into the sound era, just to see what kind of films he would have made. And his son, of course, had the alcohol issues and made some interesting films. But yeah, Mr. D.S. He never did matinees. We went anytime we wanted, including after the movie started. See Empire Strikes Back and Superman. Yeah, different eras, different styles. It was great because the Saturday matinees where I was were full of kids. They would pack them out, and you get this raucous audience of children in this old cinema. It was a beautiful time, and these kids are all unsupervised. Parents never went to them. The parents were all out doing other things, doing Saturday morning shopping and whatever else they did. It was totally full of kids without any parents, and that made it a wonderful, crazy viewing experience. Nosferatu works well, yeah, absolutely. 5 million 42. Don't Look Now, and The Wicker Man was released a double bill back in the says The Exorcist. I saw The Wicker Man um, at the state there as well. The ending of The Wicker Man when I first saw it blew me away because I thought, how's he going to get out of this? And he doesn't. Fantastic. And the music is just so integral to The Wicker Man and to building the world of Summer Isle. I've got the box set that Imprint did of The Wicker Man. And again, it's one of those box sets that inordinately happy I have. It sparks joy in me. I go totally Marie Kondo on certain box sets of movies that hit my sweet spot. But guess what, people? It's time to go. It's time to knock that naughty clock that says it's time to go. So thanks for everybody for being part of this live stream. It was a bit chaotic and shambolic as usual, but it has been a lot of fun. Yeah, a 4K print of Wicker Man is touring cinemas. I can see that. But yeah, yeah. Thanks, Jack. Evening all. I'm just going to do my goodbyes. It was better upstairs rather than downstairs because of falling Jefferson. Damien says absolutely. 4K Wicker Man released in June. We're Saturday morning cinema club. All kids 10p for the morning's entertainment. Murdersville says. Yeah, I mean, beautiful time of life. And thank you, Franny. Thank you, Murdersville. Thank you, Clayton. Yeah, so thank you, Middle Aged Geek Girl, especially for getting up early and helping with the live stream and contributing as well. She does so much to support what I do with this channel. Middle Aged Geek Girl, post a link to your channel because I want people to know you've got a channel as well. Thanks, Keith F. Thanks, Fire Moon 42, Alpha Wolf. Doug says Shambolic is good. Thanks, John P. Middle Aged Geek Girl, post that link to your channel. It's craft, but it is fun. And tomorrow, of course, you know why. Yeah, Mr. Diacendi. Yeah, they've got the circus on in London. Thanks, Clayton. Take care. Thanks, Damien. Take care, mate. And thanks again for everything. Middle Aged Geek Girl. Just looking forward to the Rank Odeon Saturday Morning Club. There's Middle Aged Geek Girl's channel. And on that note, I'll let you guys go. I'm going to soothe my sore throat and get a slightly early kind of brunch. So take care. Thanks again. Keep watching good movies. Keep watching bad movies. Watch movies that make you happy. And I'll see you next time.